Hi everyone, welcome to episode 16 of Demand Decoded. Thanks for tuning in, taking the time to join us. And today I'm joined by Amanda to discuss how you can maximize the value of your marketing agency. And I was actually a little bit unsure of this topic. Like when, Amanda suggested it, we were kind of chatting around content to create and stuff. But actually, on reflecting and, we'll dive into the reasons, I think it will be an incredibly interesting topic to anybody who's currently working with an agency and maybe planning for next year, and hopefully it will really step change your relationship and performance with them. But obviously, like, because we're an agency, sometimes it can feel a bit like, topics like this, maximizing value from your agency, can be a bit pitchy. And because we're an agency, we're going to try and pitch blend to you, but that's absolutely not true. And we're not trying to dig out any other agencies here. We're coming at this from the angle of being marketers, but also with kind of the benefit of working in an agency. Like, we've seen the things that didn't work for us as marketers, but also now we see the things that really work as an agency and the things that our customers do to help us get the best results for them. So hopefully some of the advice that Amanda's going to give here will really help you make some changes to start driving forwards with your agency. Did I cover that about right, Amanda?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think this can be a really good topic, not just for people who have agency relationships that they want to improve the results from, but also from people who are agencies. How can we change the way we're working with our customers? Ultimately, it's all going to come down to the quality of the relationship, and that's where value is really driven from. So yeah, that's what we want to talk about today, not about picking the right agency um, or actually changing what kind of agency you work with, but actually how do you get the most out of the resources that you've currently got at your fingertips, and get the most success for your business.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Right. So let's dive in. If you're watching live, feel free to ask questions in the LinkedIn chat and we'll pick them up as we go along. But yeah, let's kick things off. And I suppose, Amanda, it'd be good to kind of just quickly cover why we're actually talking about this today. And, I suppose why we're talking about how businesses can really extract value from their marketing agency, because I suppose they might be thinking, well, I'm paying the agency to deliver the value for me and generate the results for me. So shouldn't that just kind of come with the package I'm getting?
Yes. Yeah, I can completely see why that's the thing, is like, I'm paying for this, so shouldn't I just be getting it? But when we think about the fact that an agency relationship is a service, it's always going to be a service. We're not selling discrete products. It's not like you can go and say, I want exactly that. Always have to have some sort of input from your side. There's always that need for information exchange. That's why this is something that we have to talk about. How do we do more with the relationship? How do we share information better to get the best out of each other's best qualities? I think is really important. And also, kind of more broadly, in this ecosystem of businesses looking to get agencies to support them, or even freelancers, or even their own teams, how when we're doing better in our individual relationships, we are creating good practices that everyone actually ultimately benefits from. You know, the way that people interacted with agencies in the past, I think, could be quite quite transactional or quite negative. Of if you have a bad experience, you can go around spreading that bad experience. If everyone is getting on better and achieving more, I think everyone benefits. But also, ultimately, if we come back to that point about what are we trying to achieve, quite often I think it does start with that thing that people are looking at the service that they're buying and thinking about the output, the item
Yeah.
that they get out of that service, a web page, an app, and something that is more of a product, and they are not thinking about the true value, which is the success. And if you shift your thinking to creating the relationship that creates success, then you're already onto a better start than I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, and I really like the examples that you were giving before, when we chatted before this, in, you know, around other service businesses, like, well, any service business, right? But particularly the kind of building a new house example. Like,
Yes.
if you're building a new house and you hire an architect, which you would, to design the house, would you then just set them off on the task and not speak to them again before the house is complete? No, like, the communication you have throughout is so incredibly vital to the actual output. And it's the same with any service.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because you might say to an architect, I want a house. You want far more than a house. You
Yeah,
want a lifestyle, and they need to understand that lifestyle to design you the house. You
yeah,
say to your agency, we want a website. You need to tell them what that website needs to do for you and your business for them to design that website well. And they need to look at other factors, things that you don't understand, things that perhaps, in the house analogy, your structural engineer might be looking at for you, or your quantity surveyor, or whoever it is. But you're not going to that the output isn't ultimately the brief. The brief is everything that goes around it. It's a huge amount of context. Some of the other stuff that we talked about as well is, when we were spitballing this idea for this conversation, we really talked about the fact that even in what seem like simple contexts, much simpler than something on the grand scale of your grand designs Kevin McLeod moment, there's still a huge amount of information that's needed. I gave the example of you pay someone to come and clean your oven because you're not
mm,
very good at cleaning your oven yourself, and that obviously says a lot about me. But ultimately, that person needs to know what kind of oven you've got. That person needs to know where you live. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they need to be able to give you an accurate quote and then come and do that job for you. So every single service does rely on exchange of information. And also, it's especially important when it comes to anything that might be creative and subjective as a result, that
yes,
you
yeah.
do create the right environment for creativity to be delivered successfully, for subjectivity to be dealt with well as well.
Yeah, cool. And I'm sure we'll dive into more on that subjectivity point as we go. So I think to start us off, it would be good to kind of outline some of the biggest mistakes that you see marketers making, that we
Mm.
might have made actually, that, you know, marketers can change to improve the value they're receiving from their agency.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this first one feels like something I bang on about all the time, which is your classic marketing synergy point.
Mm,
People hate the word synergy, but when they actually think about the idea of something being greater than the sum of its parts, they love synergy. They love what synergy means. It means that all of the efforts that you're making work together and produce more. But the problem is, I think that when a lot of people work with agencies, they move down to the tactical level, they move away from the strategic level. And so
yeah,
they treat those tactics in isolation from the overarching goal, the overarching strategy. And what that means is you divide down your effort and you divide down your impact. You go to, let's say you go to your TikTok agency and you just brief them on your TikTok campaign.
yeah,
You go to your video partner and you just brief them on the video campaign that you want to deliver. But if you don't give them that brief in the context of the broader campaigns that you are doing, you will never get the best version of that item that comes out the other end. You will never get the best version of that TikTok if it's not riffing off something that can be seen in another part of your campaign, if it's not telling a greater story, and if it's not ultimately driving towards the overarching goals, if it's only driven on the social media metric in that one channel, it's not going to play as well with the other parts of your activity as it would if it were part of your greater strategy and plan.
yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, you look at things that, I want this one deliverable over here. I want this one poster. well, okay, but what's that poster referring to? And what, okay, there's an event. Let's find out more about the event to decide the best content for the poster. Now, that I think is another point there as well. When you are looking at your agency partner, your freelancer, whoever, as if they're only good at delivering that item that you tell them exactly how to create, you're not engaging with all of their experience. You're not engaging with everything that they know that allows them to make suggestions and be creative and have input. So the output is never going to be as good as something that you collaborated on.
Yeah. I mean, would you say that? I mean, I think I would. Like most agencies, freelancers or whatever, want to be involved in that strategic conversation and that high level. How should we do this? What are your thoughts on it? That's such a better place to start and even, come from time and time again than boom, here's the brief, boom, boom, like line by line, here's exactly what we need, go and do it.
Yeah, I think this part is so important because when you buy that person, that person's time, you buy all of their experience. If you choose to cut them off from that experience and say just deliver this part and don't give them the ability to engage all of their skill, arguably you're only getting a third or maybe less of their actual value, what they could actually contribute. And it's not necessarily, I think people, when they think about their agencies, they're very, very aware of the time that they pay for. But it can take someone the same amount of time to do something really well as it can do for them to do it based on half-baked information. But you can guarantee that if they've got more information, the result, not just in terms of what the output is, but the success of that is going to be better, because you're going to be building on all of their experience if you talk to them about the why, if you talk to them about the other items that are going to be part of this campaign, and make sure that they truly understand how this influences your ultimate goals.
Yeah, having the contextual. I suppose it comes back to that point of like nothing in marketing is siloed at
No.
all. Like all of your efforts are combined in some way, even if you don't see it within your attribution data or whatever. Like so many things are connected on your buyer's journey and you don't see it. But yeah, it all works together ultimately.
It ultimately is all being consumed together. Everything is being consumed in the great soup of people's brains. They're picking up on things on different channels and engaging with different bits of your content or different pieces of collateral and so on, and ultimately reaching their decision. So why not lean into that and make sure that what you're doing, what you're delivering, is as consistent as you want it to be and need it to be, that it all contributes towards the ultimate goal. I think the other thing is, we just mentioned that sometimes people look at the agency and think about the hour that I spend giving more context to this brief is an hour that I spend of their time and that I have to pay for. There are a couple of other mistakes that is more than one kind of mistake, because if you don't put the time into the brief, you often pay for it later down the line when you're not happy with the
Yes.
output, with what's delivered. And that can lead to work and rework and time being consumed that you didn't anticipate. And on the bigger scale, that goes a bit further, because I think a lot of marketing groups, organizations, they don't give themselves enough guidelines. They leave things to be more subjective. So when it does come down to that output, it's much, much harder for them to sign things off. So things like not having fully fleshed out brand guidelines. Brand guidelines feel expensive. Absolutely. Maybe they're going to cost you 50 or 100 hours, but they are probably going to save you dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands, over the lifetime that they are in
Yeah,
use.
and
They're
it's not
going to
even
save
the
you
time,
from
is
so
it?
many bad decisions and
Yeah.
subjective arguments.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't even save you time having these rules and guidelines in place. Like when we had Rob on talking about tone of voice, he kind of said a similar thing. It's like setting yourself up with these guidelines, these tone of voice guidelines, goes an incredibly long way before from where you are now. You can use those to work with agencies in the future or new people that come on board in the team. And it removes any subjectivity around, oh, should we kind of use that tone there, or should we use that word or that word? It's like, well, that's our guideline, so use that basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Time spent arguing ahead of making a decision, either with your agency, like the person who's done the work for you, or amongst yourselves with you and your other stakeholders, that is all wasted time that costs your business money. But I realized that that money and cost is invisible at the point in time when you're signing off on the budget for your brand guidelines or your tone of voice guide. But actually, yeah, I think more organizations could set themselves and their partners up for better success by making sure that they had those guidelines in place.
Yeah. Do you think agencies can set themselves up for better success by really advocating for having these guidelines in place before, I don't know, before you even start working with these people? Because I suppose not having them and going back and forth on should we use that purple or this purple could actually cause over time a breakdown in the relationship.
100%, and that's speaking from experience on agency side as well as as on the marketing side. When things are ambiguous and leave you arguing to get something done, it erodes relationships. It ultimately does, and that can be between people in your own team, but they are usually the people you have to put up with for longer. Oh, but certainly between you and your agency, it can make it very hard to then get back on the same page as to how we're going to go about achieving success. So that investment in that rule setting, I think I think agencies are often afraid to ask for it.
Because
Um,
it's a big cost.
it's perceived as a big cost,
Yeah.
absolutely, and it's not seen as something that generates revenue, but it facilitates all of the efforts that do lead to the generation of revenue.
Yeah, for sure. I really think that's such a valuable point, and hopefully, yeah, some people can take that away. So, that's some things that, well, big mistakes that marketers make. So, what are, on the flip side of that, some of the most important things that marketers should be doing to increase the value they're getting from their agency?
Hmm. I suppose if we think about what they can be doing right now, certainly
Mm,
make sure that you've got a plan for next year and that your agency is aware of it. It's really common that people turn up with their plans
yeah.
on January the 1st, and the agency is already on the back foot because they didn't know that this was the plan that they would be working to, and they've now got to turn things around to fit to that plan. So I think if you are planning, talking to your agencies about that planning phase and what you're considering and the options that are available and getting their recommendations is important. I know as well that that can feel like, oh, your agency is just going to gouge you and use that as an opportunity to upsell. Sometimes that's true, of course, everyone is looking to grow, but an agency that treats you as a partner and that you are treating as a partner should look at it as the opportunity to get you the best return on the investment that you're able to make. And sometimes that might mean suggesting different activities, or sometimes that might mean adjustments to the way that you're looking at your goals.
Mm.
So, getting their input and getting a dialogue going there will be really valuable to both you and them.
Yeah, is that true even in the case where the agency isn't necessarily a strategic partner working with you on your marketing strategy? What if it's just like a design agency, or they're working on something um, not in silo, but kind of as its own thing, standalone?
I suppose there's a question of how siloed, how often is something truly siloed? If you're saying we're going to spend this much on these many of this item, very few agencies aren't going to have an opinion on whether that item is the best kind of item to be making with that budget. Okay, you say you want 12 of this kind of campaign. We actually think that an investment in 8 of this other slightly larger type of campaign for the same amount of budget would be better. So how
Mm.
Maybe perhaps in some situations where you're getting like widgets designed to go onto your app platform or something like that, it's different. But even then, your developers are going to have opinions based on what they see from user testing and feedback. So how often is it true that there's no dialogue to be had? I would really
Yeah,
question that.
yeah, it's definitely true, and especially for, like budgeting and things, like marketers will be putting their budgets together for like PPC and ad spend and even agency spend, for next year, and sharing that with your agency right now um, is way more beneficial than waiting until, like you say, January the 1st or the 2nd bank holiday on the 1st.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
What else can they be doing? I mean, certainly, I think you can be taking a look at what you've already got and what you're able to provide in terms of guidance.
yeah,
Um, to ask yourself the question of, are you giving your agency the opportunities to succeed for you? Are you giving them everything that will be helpful to them? So look over what you've got in terms of your brand and its guidelines. Look over your tone of voice, and anything that you might have on your messaging. One of the things that I come back to quite often in the way that I work, just generally, is that every time you can have a rule, you don't have to make a decision.
mm,
And so anything that takes decision making and ultimately subjectivity and disagreement off the table is going to be a good thing for you going into the new year. Any time when you can go, this is, I'm giving you the brand guidelines and you're working to them, or you're saying this doesn't conform, you're not having to make a decision about whether that shade or that shade is the right shade. That's all being decided for you and you're just enforcing, which is less draining mentally, and certainly gives your agency every opportunity to get it right first time, which saves you and them time and money.
yeah. And I suppose would the last point be going back to when we said about mistakes made and kind of giving agencies more context in the briefing and stuff? Just spend a bit more time on that, dedicate a bit more time to it, and then look at the output on what you're getting.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what can you do right when we think about what you can be doing right now to increase the value you're getting from your agency? Taking a step back and thinking about the way you work together on the tasks that you have, that briefing
Yeah.
element being so important. Is it effective? If you're finding that you're spending a lot of time sweating over the work and having to push it and push it back and forward between you, then probably not. Something is going wrong at the point where where the information is being captured, most likely. Um, so thinking about how you can refresh that part of your relationship and do better with it would be a really good thing. Probably also having an open and honest conversation about it with the agency if you feel genuinely like something is not working and it's not a tangible thing, like you're not getting the results that you want, but maybe it is that.
Mm.
Talking to them informally about that. What can we do to turn this around? What can we do to work together more effectively?
Yeah, well, actually, it'd be good to dive a bit deeper into that, I think. And
Mm,
for people that aren't happy with their current agency, for whatever reason, like you just said, it might be that the results aren't there. You're just not happy with the relationship. You might not like the people. Who knows?
mm.
There's so many reasons, isn't there, for agencies and marketer relationships falling down. So what can marketers do if they're not happy with their current agency to resolve that issue, come out the other side, driving results, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that it is really important. That second part of the question is the most important thing, because this is, again, this is not about us saying if you're not happy with your current agency, just change it. This is about us saying, think about what you need to do to get the most out of your current agency. So if you're not happy, um, and ultimately there's a really important reason for that, because there can be some serious long-term impacts of not achieving success with your current agency, even if ultimately you might want to move on. if you are trying to move on from a position of we really failed with that agency, you may well struggle to get as much budget or the budget that you need next time to invest effectively in the future relationship that you want to develop. You may struggle to get buy-in to alternate plans that you come up with. Far better to make a change based on a moderate amount of success but wanting to change tactics than I've got a failed relationship of one kind and I want to replace it with another agency that does exactly the same kind of thing. Actually resolving the issues you have and making sure you get success is probably going to be better for you in the long term. So what can you do if you're not happy? I think the first thing is going to be, well, certainly to reflect on what you can be doing differently. Obviously, that's not to say that your agency is not going to have their share of blame in any situation, absolutely not. But if we operate from the basis that you can't control other people, the only person you can control is yourself, then start by looking at you and asking yourself, have they been given that opportunity to succeed? Have they had enough information? Do they understand what you are looking to achieve? Do they understand what impact their work does and doesn't have? Do they, you might have a KPI with them, but can they see the other effects of that KPI? Now, it might be that you can say month on month to them, oh, we said we were going to get 5 marketing qualified leads, but we're only getting 2. Sometimes 2 is okay, isn't it? Because sometimes those deal sizes are enormous and it makes up a huge amount of difference. And you didn't need 5, but you wish you'd got 5 of that size, but it's not painful. Sometimes those 2 deals come through and it's 2 instead of 5 and they're tiny. Making sure that impact on where the business is going is apparent to them, that they feel your business is paying the way that you do, they understand it the way that you can. That's important too, because it means that when they're looking at things, they understand the risk fully and so on.
Yeah, it's that emotional kind of investment into it as well, isn't it? It probably helps the agency and the team that you're working with to truly understand what you're feeling in that moment when you don't hit your number, because it's different when you're the person sat on the other side of the board or whatever, and you didn't hit target. The agency aren't there with you feeling that anxiety before you go in, the emotions when you're sat right there.
No, exactly. If they don't understand what that KPI ultimately contributes to, be it your report to your commercial director or your stand-up presentation in front of the whole board, or just another, or it actually contributes to, oh, in the end we had a bad year and that is because of these factors, that transparency is important. They need to understand the impact of their work. And when there has been success, they need to understand it too, because that's all information that they can work on to make better recommendations in the future. You might look at, let's say you did 10 campaigns last year and one of them was somehow a real knockout. You might think from your internal review of it, I know what made this a success, and you might go after that. But if you look at that with your agencies and say, why this one? They might have different perspectives on it that mean that you plan differently next year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Any others? Any other quick,
I think you have to think about all of the touch points of the relationship. Take a look at how you're sharing feedback between you and the agency, how you are keeping track of changes that need to be made and so on. So is it that every time you review something, you're sweating over every detail of every little sentence in it, and that more needs to be done to work therefore on your tone of voice so that they don't choose words you wouldn't like, or even just, are things being captured as ongoing guidance, so that you don't have to make the same point again and again and again? Are they being tracked in a way that's easy for you both to manage? I think is important too. Do you have the right tools between you for collaborating? certainly, and then look at yeah, what you can do, as we said before, to take those subjective elements out of the conversation. If
Yeah.
you really look at it and you want to lean into that capability in the team that you're working with, are you going to sit here and sweat over the choice of enterprise versus organization? Sometimes yes, sometimes there's a really good reason. But if there's a really good reason for that, you should probably be capturing it somewhere as to why, so that people have that as part of the overarching brief of working with you.
Yeah. And it's probably likely that you see in the feedback, things, the feedback that you're given on things, that there's regular occurrences of feedback popping up. It might be, like you said, sentence structure or whatever, or a particular design element, and then setting
Mm.
aside some budget and some focus on those rules, those guidelines will probably like resolve those things.
Yes, I think so. Um, if you take a step back and you find that you are having to quibble lots and lots of design things and choices of imagery or choices of color use and so on, maybe there's not enough information in your brand.
Yeah, cool. And kind of, off the cuff a bit, any tips on how you can improve that communication with your marketing agency? Because I do think a lot of the breakdown in these things, almost everything, is communication. Whether it's you're not happy with the results, you're giving too much feedback, and the same feedback on the same things over and over again. It's just communication at the end of the day, isn't it?
Hmm. I think sometimes, again, there can be a reluctance to spend time on things that are not outputs.
Mm,
So, if you want to encourage collaboration, true collaboration between you as a business and your team and your agency, then being prepared for there to be conversations that aren't your meeting about the deliverables and are we going to have that campaign out on time, having conversations between, let's say, your digital marketer and someone else in the agency team who's really good at looking at data might not have a deliverable attached
mm,
to it, but it might lead to some really good ideas for how campaigns might be shaped in the future. It will improve collaboration. How can you encourage collaboration? Unfortunately, there is an element of it that is transactional. If you are going to work closely with your agency and get the best out of them, you have to pay for that time to collaborate. But that time should repay itself with interest ultimately when the work that comes through is better, the ideas that come out are better, when the agreed plans make more sense and are easier to sign off.
yeah, it's a lot of it does come back to money, doesn't it? When you're talking about agency freelancer relationships.
It's a really hard one, isn't it? Because ultimately, to have a truly collaborative and creative relationship, it can feel really hard for there to be a commercial element to that. If you want people to be free flowing and stuff, you don't want them to be looking at the clock. Absolutely. But seeing that as cost and not investment is probably the problem there. Seeing that as time wasted and not time ultimately saved or time that increases value overall is the problem. Being uncomfortable with spending time on ideas, spending time on investigations together and actually saying we're going to set aside this time purely for collaboration. That I think that is a real miss ultimately.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. It's looking at the long-term picture, isn't it? Most of the
Mhm.
time. I might have to spend this little bit extra to give the agency a little bit more context, or to yeah, just get their ideas on this upcoming thing. Because ultimately, if the agency is taking time to do it, you will probably have to pay for it. But yeah, it's just perceiving that as the long-term value rather than the short-term costs and investment of that.
Yes. Yeah, ultimately the real yardstick for all of our work, in-house marketing, agency marketing, anywhere, is the not just the number of items that go out the door. It is the return that those things get. It's the success that they achieve together. And it can be, if anyone needs just like one thing to take away from this, it is that by investing that time, investing in that upfront, you will save time and money. You will spend less time reviewing the work. You will spend, you will see greater success. But it doesn't feel like it when you're asked to spend 8 hours in collaboration and workshops before something gets going. Completely understand that. But truth be told, that is the shift that you need to make in where your budget is being spent. You're going to spend that time either way. Spend it constructively, not in retrospect, having to fix things that could have been right from day one.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a really good point to end on, actually. And I now need to go and phone my oven cleaner, because you've reminded me that my ovens need cleaning. So, so let's wrap it up. That was actually amazing and really informative. I take it back that I was ever worried about this episode, because I think there were some really, really good points in there for anybody, really. Like any marketers that are working with an agency, their own team, probably any freelancer. I'm sure there are some tips in there that Amanda gave that, yeah, anybody can take. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode of Demand Decoded. You can obviously follow the Blend LinkedIn page to join any future events live and watch any back or listen on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or basically any platform if you just search for Demand Decoded. So thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.